perfect near-miss hearing, right? Said a voice behind Midas. He froze. He knew it was Jack. There was nowhere to duck. She had him. He tried to spin around fast and found himself in the red bench room. Midas ran out of the dugout to see IQ talking to Zoner, Port, Aid, and Oracle. Who got you? Asked IQ. I think it was Jack, Midas said. Now I have to go and get her back. That was cheap not letting us in town, Zoner said. I didn't break any rules. Midas was off and running again. For the next hour, the children played K-Tag and turned it into the no allies free-for-all that Coach Hans had told them it should be in the beginning. All the would-be team members eventually turned on each other. Midas kept his score high by benching more than anyone. Jack red-benched Midas more than anyone else. Coach Hansen was perched in one of the taller buildings watching the firefight. She saw the time was getting close to call all the alphas in for a change in rules. Knight was hiding behind a building edge firing at Port when Port returned fire. The K-gun blast hit the building near Knight and showered his face with splinters. Knight screamed loudly. Coach Hansen saw this and ran down the steps toward the hurt teen. The other children heard the scream and looked out. Dugout, all K-guns off, she said into her earpiece. The game is called. We have an injured student. Coach Hansen reached Knight and pulled his hands from his face. Calm down, you'll be fine. All the children quickly gathered around. Knight had blood covering his head and pieces of wood embedded in his face. Is any of the wood in his eyes? Hollow asked with a look of horror. Yes, but he'll be fine. Coach touched his face and he stopped squirming. The pieces of wood fell out of his face and the wounds closed. Knight blinked his eyes and stood up. Here, you'll need this, she said, handing him a wet napkin of some kind from one of her pockets. Knight started wiping the blood off of his now healed face. He cleaned up and it looked like nothing happened. I'm a healer. In addition to your red harnesses, we'll always have a healer present during games, Coach Hansen said to everyone. The games and training at Alpha can be tough, but we work hard to ensure they are safe. Coach then told everyone to go back to the dugout for a new game. In the dugout, Jack was rubbing in her successful hunting of Midas to him. And the crowd keeps chanting his name. Midas, Midas, watch out for Jack. The other children laughed at Midas. It's not funny, said Midas. He really looks upset, thought IQ. Are you really mad? It's just, she was only after me, Midas said with a hurt voice. And everyone else was against me. Everyone was against you because you were getting everyone else. Your score was at least 3 times the next best. I still don't like it, he said while looking forward in a pout. IQ thought he was acting like a baby. At this point, IQ had the choice to help him get over it or to make it much worse. IQ's heart was too big to hurt the younger boy. He thought to himself, how can I put this to him so he'll straighten up without thinking I'm being his mom? Midas, if you act like a sissy for getting shot, the other kids will never stop riding you. Act like a superhero and go congratulate Jack for getting you. Then ask her how she did it. Midas perked up because he knew IQ was right. He wanted to know how Jack knew. He also thought of what his father said to him before he left. Right, thanks, he said to IQ. Midas went over to Jack and tried to act grown up. Good job. I didn't think anyone would get me that easy. Well, it wasn't that easy. You did great, Jack said in a genuine tone. How were you able to get me? A better question is why everyone else couldn't get him, Coach Hansen said loudly. Everyone take a seat. This is what we call a game review. Why was Midas able to keep you out of the town for so long? Jack said, I know. Coach Hansen said, stand up and tell us. His hearing. When we were at dinner, Midas was able to hear Knight and Zoner when they checked in from the dining room. IQ grunted and made a face. It looked like he was upset he hadn't figured it out himself. With his hearing, he knew where people were because we kept talking. Playing video games when we broke into teams, he knew what people were doing before they did them. I figured he could hear them make up strategy with each other, Jack said. The other children looked at Midas, who had a guilty smile on his face. You're all so loud, even when you weren't talking. You didn't even try to keep quiet. It was like a stampede or something. IQ looked at Jack and said, So you used us as bait. You snuck away quietly and waited for Midas to come after us. 3 times I did. Like in the game, I knew he would lead you fast to get you to bunch up close. That way, he could take you out as a group. Settle down, said Coach Hansen. I knew Midas would do what he did in this first game. The children looked at her like she betrayed them. This is your first lesson. Think like your opponent. Here's what that means. Your opponent will have different strengths, weaknesses, powers, and brains than you. You will need to think like them to anticipate their moves. Midas has hearing. The next opponent may have X-ray vision, night vision, remote viewing, thermal vision, or just plain read your mind. We have time for a few more games. This time Jack and Midas on one team, the rest of the girls on another, and the rest of the boys on the last. You will have 30 minutes of play. After that, you will run to your hotel room and be downstairs for lunch on time. All K-guns are active in 5 minutes. Go! The game slowed as the teams held their ground and moved slower and quieter. After a few minutes, the game changed again as the girls' team took the rooftops and sniped the boys from long range. Midas and Jack were outnumbered by either team, but were also the fastest and ended up with the best score for the second round. During lunch, IQ congratulated Jack for thinking of the hearing. I had forgotten completely about his hearing when Knight and Zoner checked in. Well, I don't know if I would have thought of it if it wasn't for trying to figure out how he was doing so well on the video games. Midas looked a little down. Are you guys still going to play video games with me? Are you still going to listen to the other players when they talk? Jack asked. Of course he is, IQ answered. You like to win, don't you? I sure don't like losing, Midas said. I bet you won everything at home. A perfect near miss among regular kids. Did you ever lose at anything before? IQ asked. Midas shook his head no. You better get used to it quick. The meteor punchers get here next week. We may be brains, healers, and Hollow may be a stealth, I think. But the hitters, leaders, and anchors are powerful. Have you ever met someone who can move so fast that they could bench everyone before they could blink? IQ asked. No. They show up this weekend? Midas asked. Yup, and we will all be benched then. But you'll be in excellent company, he said, pointing to his face with both index fingers. After lunch, Coach Hansen walked them into the hotel's conference rooms. She began teaching them what they can or can't say about Alpha, who they can call and who they can email. After 2 hours of lecture, they took a break. During break, the children had snacks and talked. All this to dial home? Knight said in exhaustion. The location of Alpha is a big secret, said Port. Omni himself said that if Alpha had existed 50 years earlier, there would have been no Coalition's war, Armory said. IQ was at the front of the room talking to Coach Hansen. Jack noticed he looked serious and was asking her a lot of questions. Midas, can you hear what IQ is saying? Is it something I'll get shot for? No, I'm just curious to know what he thinks is so important about what she just said, Jack said. Midas listened to Coach and IQ talk for a moment, and then he said, He's asking questions to better understand the course, so he can teach this class to the meteor punchers next week. It sounds like we all get a task. It's part of their help the red shirts feel like they belong here stuff, Zoner said. What are you talking about? Asked Midas. I'm a mind reader. I can hear it in text thoughts, the coach's thoughts, even my rep that brought me here. Red Shirt Indoc Week is so we feel comfortable before the other kids get here, Zoner said. Why do we need to be treated like this? Jack asked out loud to no one. IQ came over to eat his snack before the session started again. While eating, the others told him what they were talking about. Each team needs a brain and a healer. Some of us don't have super bodies. Red Shirt Indoc is to help us adjust before the powerful kids get here. By doing this, less red shirts have problems later, IQ said. How did you know this? Asked Midas. That's why they call me IQ. The session continued on until dinner. After dinner, the children all played video games and were friends no matter what team they were on. After the video games and TVs were turned off, Midas lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I wonder what kind of team I'll be a brain on, he thought. After a day of running and excitement, it didn't take long for sleep to overtake him.